All right. Well, again, as folks join us, I want to say a huge thank you for taking the time to learn a little bit about Parker Dewey and how we collaborate with universities, with nonprofit organizations, and truly try to be, as I've said to a few folks today already, an extension to your team. Because we are seeing and hearing from our various partners that it is a very busy time of the year, and that many of you still have roles on your own team to fill, and that many of you maybe even new to your role. So for those of you who are looking for a refresh on what this micro-internship thing is all about, welcome. We're really glad to have you join us. And those of you who are a little newer to the concept, but are also maybe just interested in learning more, again, welcome. So excited to hear a little bit about how we can perhaps be supportive of your various initiatives. So just as a quick background, I'm joined here by my colleague, Danielle Ruger-Morawski, who'll be introducing herself in just a moment as well. But my name is Kristen Schrader, and I lead our partnership team, and just really excited to share a little bit about what Parker Dewey is and how it all works for students and companies. But we want to spend quite a bit of time making this conversation strategic and tactical for those of you who are interested in figuring out, okay, there's micro-internships, but how do I make it work for my institution? How can it align with the many, many, many other things that are on my to-do list? And how can I make my students as successful as possible? And so we are hoping to unpack some of those thoughts and the various ways that we can be supportive through our conversation. Don't be a stranger, though. If you want to pop questions into the chat, we'll answer those as close to real time as we can. We'll also send you the slides as well as this recording. So again, feel free to take notes along the way, but know that we also will send a lot of this, the links, etc. You can access later on. But just to get us started, I'm going to have now Danielle just do a quick little intro so you'll know who's in the room from our perspective. And Danielle, if you want to share a little bit about your journey to the Parker Dewey team.
Hey everyone, my name is Danielle and I joined the Parker Dewey team in January, and before that I worked in career services. So when we say that we understand where y'all are, we genuinely do. Both Kristen and I have been there. I worked at a small liberal arts institution, and before that I worked at an even smaller fine arts institution. So we know that you all are trying, not only trying, but actually doing a whole lot with very little, and that there are lots of students that you're working with that have so many talents and so much to offer companies and employers that maybe for one reason or another are struggling to get those experiential learning opportunities. So figured we could go ahead and jump right into some of the experiences that we encountered in our own career services experiences, and that we've seen some students who have taken advantage of Parker Dewey Micro-Internships also encounter. So what we've done right now is we've launched a poll because we want to get an idea of how many of these same types of situations maybe you are encountering in the students that you work with, if you happen to be student facing. But what you're seeing here are a couple of common things that we've heard from students, whether they are lacking transportation and struggling to get to an opportunity, or even if they had transportation, maybe they are interested in something that doesn't have opportunities in their geographic area. Or maybe they are a student athlete and their schedule just isn't allowing for micro-internships, or maybe they're just having trouble getting noticed by those internships. There's a lot of different reasons that students might be struggling to fit traditional experiential learning into their schedule. And in the career services world, we all know how crucial that experiential learning and making those direct connections with employers can be. So we like to get an idea of where you might be and where your students might be. So moving on from that, also want to look at the other side of things. And that is what the employers want. And Kristen will take it from here.
Exactly, because not only are students struggling to connect, but we're hearing again and again from employers and organizations that it is a weird and wacky recruiting season out there. I can't tell you how many for hire and hiring and now help wanted, et cetera, signs. And so as you think about what you're hearing, for those of you who are employer facing, what are some of the challenges that they're experiencing? And so some of these companies that you see on the slide, they're the ones coming to us and saying, hey, we are looking for new opportunities and ways to connect, especially early on. We want to connect with first or second year students. We want to help students understand that working at Staples does not necessarily mean working in a retail store, or that there's really, really interesting opportunities at a company that manufactures stuff like a Lenovo of the world, or a Northrop Grumman, or a PepsiCo. Or how do I get a student who may be an accounting or a marketing major to realize that there's amazing opportunities at Microsoft or Pepsi? And then what about a company like Xylem, which you're forgiven if you've never heard of them, because I know I hadn't until about 6 or so months ago. But they are a multi-billion-dollar water technology company that's doing amazing work all over the world, trying to bring fresh water to the world. And so they have some really interesting projects in engineering and HR and social impact and just all of these different departments, and are using micro-internships as a way to help enhance their brand, to be able to share with students that, hey, this is a really, really exciting cause that you might be interested in working towards. I actually just saw a statistic one of our colleagues shared earlier today. What was it, 55% was the number, Danielle, that of students are more interested not in so much the company or the job title, but are more passionate about what exactly they're going to be doing in terms of their cause that they can kind of devote their life to. And we think about there's so many social justice issues and just causes that a lot of folks get really, really fired up on, and something like a Xylem might be a great fit for a student, but they need to know what that is in the first place. And it's really helpful for us to see that what we're hearing from companies aligns with what you are as well. So things like, how can I get students more interested in my opportunities, or how can I get folks to apply if they've never heard of my organization, and so on. So again, those of you who've completed the poll, we appreciate your thoughts, and just helping us to set the groundwork to make sure we're all speaking from the same playbook, which we are. And so given what students want, companies want, where does Parker Dewey fit in? And that is that we are at the core a very mission-driven organization, with our goal being to try to provide more opportunities for students of all backgrounds, more accessible ways for them to connect with organizations and build a better and more accessible path from college to career. And our method of doing that is micro-internships. And if you're not sure what that is, again, you come to the right place, stay tuned. But we came up with the concept 7 years ago. This isn't a newfangled COVID thing. We've been doing it for quite a while now, and work with over 500 different colleges and universities, all of which have come to us through word of mouth. We've done no direct marketing to schools or to students. And we also work with dozens of nonprofits who are seeing micro-internships as a way to help support their students, but also that may align with some of their other institutional priorities. And so these opportunities, these short-term paid professional projects, allow students at all stages of their academic journey to connect with organizations, real-world organizations, real projects that are occurring nationwide. So Danielle, do you want to unpack a little bit of that for us here? Because I've said a lot of different things thus far.
Yeah, so just want to start out talking about some of the most common types of projects that we see on the platform, but also want to clarify that one of the great things about micro-internships, and there are a lot of great things about them, but one of them is that we really do see projects that span every different type of department, every different type of industry. These are just a few examples of some of the ones that we tend to see more commonly. So we have a project library. We'll talk more about how you can engage with all your different stakeholders, your students, your employers, your alumni. So if you have those alumni and those employers who are maybe thinking, oh, this would be a great way to engage with students, but I'm not sure where to get started, we have a whole library with these types of projects just to help get those wheels turning. But let's dig in a little bit deeper first into what these actually are. What are micro-internships at their core? So first of all, when it comes to length, this are projects as opposed to your traditional internship experience that spans a full semester instead of a fall, spring, summer. This is about the duration of a project. And when they're done with that project, typically somewhere to 5 to 40 hours, although there's nothing magic about their number, that's when they're done with the micro-internship. And the project might be due anywhere from a few days to a few weeks after it's kicked off. The other thing about micro-internships that makes them accessible to all sorts of students, like some of those that we saw in that earlier slide, is that every single project on the Parker Dewey platform is paid and paid competitively. So for the companies, they are paying for the project in its entirety as opposed to an hourly rate. So that usually ends up being somewhere in that $200 to $600 mark. So for those that in the poll for things that you're hearing from employers are saying, why aren't students applying to my unpaid internship? In many cases, it may not be not because they're not interested in your company, but for some of these students, they simply can't afford to take that unpaid opportunity. And maybe there's not enough money in the budget for an entire semester paid internship, but most companies do have the opportunity to be able to pay for a paid project. And 90% of that goes directly to the micro intern. We hold that project money once the student is selected in escrow, and then that 90% goes to them once it is completed. There is no fee, spoiler, we're going to talk about this more, but no fee to partner with Parker Dewey. There's no fee for the companies to post the projects, no fee for the students to use it. So we are only able to continue doing what we do as long as students are securing these paid professional projects. And let's say a company hires your student and goes, wow, they were amazing. I want to hire them for a traditional internship. I want to hire them for a full-time role. There's no conversion fees, no hiring fees. We're not a staffing or a recruiting firm, nothing like that. These are also available year-round. So for your partner employers who are looking ways to engage students throughout the year, they don't have to wait for the fall or the spring or the summer. Whenever they have a project that needs done, they can engage with your students in this way. And the vast majority of the projects on Parker Dewey are remote, which again increases that accessibility. These are also easy for both students and for companies. So on the student side of things, as opposed to having to customize a resume for every single project and write a cover letters for every single project. And again, Kristen and I were both in career services, so we know that's the last thing your students want to do. And realistically, that was one of the last things I wanted to help students do for every single project. So we know that's probably where you are too. On Parker Dewey, they can upload one resume, so they want to make sure it's one with wide appeal, but they don't need to customize it for every single project. Companies understand that they're uploading one resume. And then as opposed to writing a cover letter for every single opportunity, what they're doing is responding to short answer questions, one of which is always, why should we hire you for this project? So that's where students get an opportunity to let their passions shine and really levels the playing field, because that's the thing that companies are primarily looking at. On the company side, we've made it easy for them because for some companies, the process of putting a student on payroll and dealing with tax forms might be more arduous than just doing whatever the project is themselves. So to eliminate that barrier, we, Parker Dewey, are actually the employer of record for every single one of these projects. Meaning for the companies, it's as easy for them as swiping a credit card to buy supplies. We've eliminated those arduous barriers. But students are under an NDA, meaning that companies can rest easy knowing that their information or any other data that they share with the student is protected in that way. We also like to clarify these projects are professional projects. There are other sites where people can go for, I'm looking for someone to wash my fence, or I'm looking for someone to walk my dog. And there's nothing wrong with those sites, but that's not what Parker Dewey is for. These are the same kind of projects that a student or a recent grad would get if they were engaged in an internship or if they were a new full-time hire. It's just that opposed to being part of that longer experience, these are isolated, so students get to kind of dip their toe in the water before making a longer-term commitment. We're also excited to be able to share that over 98% of micro-internships exceed employer expectations. So students are excited to put those professional best feet forward. And we also like to make it clear we love traditional internships and all the other amazing initiatives that our partners do. These are not intended to replace any of those, but rather it's a really nice complement to add to your existing menu of items for students who, for many of the reasons we already discussed, may be struggling to access those traditional experiential learning opportunities.
So a way to think of this, and by the way, I know that was a lot of information. So if you didn't catch everything, it's all good. We're going to unpack a lot of those things as we go through this. But a way to think of this is like gig work, but with training wheels. Because the gig economy is something that it's here to stay. Lots and lots of folks, including some of you, may already be doing it. But your students may not have had that opportunity. They may not have ever done any sort of independent contracting kind of work before. And we recognize that. And so we provide them with a ton of supports to be able to not only say, okay, you can go to your professor and go to a mentor, alum, et cetera, if you need help on a project, but we're also handling all that back end admin, et cetera, which really helps the student so that they don't have to figure any of that out. They don't have to go to a company and say, okay, how do I do billing, or go play collections agent or any of that nonsense. But same thing with the companies. They too, as Danielle described, I think beautifully, is it's just a very simple transaction for them, just as if they were to go buy supplies or whatever. And it allows then those hiring managers to be engaged very, very early in the process, so that it don't have to be somebody who works in HR or on the recruiting team. It could be somebody who works in accounting or operations or sales or whatever. Think of your alumni who may not work in HR, but may still want to give back or connect. Again, lots of different ways that this can fit in. So that being said, how much does it all cost? And as Danielle already alluded to, for students, free. We're an open platform. Your students already have access to these opportunities and are encouraged to participate. But yes, there is a strategic advantage to partnering with Parker Dewey, which is also at no cost. And again, we'll unpack those different advantages. But essentially, we want to help be a partner to you all and understand what your goals are for wanting to bring micro-internship opportunities to your campus community, and be able to support you with whatever resources, whatever data, whatever sort of extra tools that you might need, so that your program and your students in turn are as successful as possible. So again, we'll unpack that a little bit more further on. But yeah, I'd love to hear and talk about now how it all works for both students and as well as alumni. One thing to be clear is that this is an opportunity that is available to students at all stages of their academic journey, even after they've graduated. And this includes your graduate students, but this also includes anybody who may still be a year or two or whatever out, and now just still trying to figure out what it is that they want to do. This also may include those who come to you. If you serve your alumni and they're 10 years after they've graduated, and now they are wanting to shift gears, this may be an opportunity for them as well. But it's 3 simple steps for both students and employers. Danielle, do you want to kind of highlight what those are?
Yeah, we'll walk you through each of these in detail, but those 3 simple steps are: 1, creating a profile, and it's not an in-depth thing. It takes less than 10 minutes, no single sign-on or IT integration needed, and then checking out those projects and applying, and then if they're selected, completing the project. So before I dig into what that process actually looks like, just want to make clear that behind the scenes, we are vetting each of these projects. We are keeping an eye out to make sure, again, are these projects appropriate for these platforms? Are the same, or this platform? Is it the same kind of projects that these students and recent graduates would see if they were in a traditional internship, or if they were a recent full-time hire? Again, we are the employer of record, so we're doing all the legal, all the payroll, and those support materials that Kristen mentioned. So with that, I want to clarify that you're also going to get some slides that have some screenshots, but I figure let's dive right into the platform so you can see it live. So this is what it looks like to set up the profile. We do not have a lot in terms of what is required, because we want students to be able to start looking at the opportunities, but we do have lots of tips for helping them make their profile stand out. I'm going to start by reviewing what is required. One of the first things is the current location and the hometown. And the reason for that is because we have some companies who use micro-internships as a way to audition talent for longer term opportunities. And some of those longer term opportunities might be an on-site internship, for example. And it's helpful for them to know, if this student does an outstanding job at this micro-internship, is it feasible that they would be able to come in and do this on-site internship? So that's why we require that information. The other piece that we require is education. And one reason we do that is because companies have the option to feature projects exclusively to students from your institution. And we see this happen in a couple of use cases. One is if a company is an alumni and they really see this as a way to give back to students from their alma mater. They might say, I exclusively want to work with students from where I went to school. Another is the example I previously provided. They might be using this micro-internship as a way to test for a longer term opportunity. So they might make it exclusively available to schools in their geographic area to make sure that that student or recent graduate, more likely student if we're talking about internships, would be able to engage in that internship after the micro-internship is over. But either way, we want to make sure that students are able to see any projects that are exclusively available to them, which is why we require that they add their education information. We also require that they answer questions about demographics. Now, they do have the option to select prefer not to disclose if they choose, and we want to make it clear companies do not see this information. This is just for us because one of our goals at Parker Dewey is to make that college to career gap more accessible and more equitable. So by collecting this information from the students and recent grads, we call them career launchers who are using this platform, we're able to know how good a job we're doing at that. And we're excited to share some statistics with you a little bit later on in this conversation that show how well we are doing that. Now, there are other sections, including experience, where they can upload their resume, an opportunity to showcase some other documents that might highlight their skills that we recommend to help their profile stand out. But in terms of what they need to do to be able to look at projects, that's about it. So they can look at their dashboard, and that's where they're going to be able to see opportunities. Now, right now, I have myself set to an institution that does have a couple of featured projects. So if they have projects featured, they will see them right up here at the top, like you see these ones here. They added quite a few today. And then after that, you will see all open micro-internships. So from here, if they see a project that is of interest, so if they say, okay, this looks interesting to me, it's very easy to click this drop-down menu. And we encourage them first to look over here on the side because there are some key pieces of information that are usually going to be helpful to look at first. One is the anticipated kickoff date. So this is when the company is anticipating that this project is going to get started, as well as an anticipated due date. So this allows the career launcher to know, okay, do I have enough time in my schedule for a project during this time? Now, like we mentioned before, the pay for these projects is per project, not per hours. So this is an estimated number of hours. And we have this here because, as Kristen mentioned, we have everyone from first-year students to recent graduates using that platform. And because for a first-year student, this might be the first time they're doing this kind of project, and it might take them a little bit longer than a recent graduate. So we want to make sure for the companies that they're paying for the work being done, but for those students who may be doing something like this for the first time, it helps them to have a ballpark of roughly how long this might take them. This is where they can also see if a project is on-site or remote. Now, the vast majority of the projects are going to be remote, but every once in a while, there's going to be a project that just by its nature has to be on-site, and this is where they can check that. The location is always going to be up at the top. And then what they see here for payment is that 90%. So there's no confusion. There's never any going, well, it said 400. Why did I get paid 360? What they see here is what they will get paid if they are selected for and complete the project. So once they've looked, if they're going, okay, this works with my schedule, I have that much time, that pay makes sense, I am interested in this project, they can click apply. And then the company has the opportunity to decide how many questions they are going to have for their application. This one is always going to be here. Why do you think we should select you for this opportunity? And in the case of this company, they decided not to ask any additional questions. So for this, answering this question would be the entirety of the application. So we weren't kidding when we said it is simple and easy for your students and recent graduates to apply to these projects. Some companies might choose to add a few additional questions, and how they handle it from there really depends on the company. Some companies will say, okay, we are leaning towards Yolanda based on their answers, so we're going to go ahead and hire Yolanda. Other companies will say, okay, we're leaning towards Yolanda, let's set up an interview to make sure it's a good fit, and then we'll move forward. Other companies still might say, okay, here are our top 3 picks based on the applications we've gotten. Let's conduct interviews with all 3 of them, and then we'll make a decision. Companies, again, it's up to them how they handle it, but we like to clarify that these short answer responses may very well be the only opportunity that your students have to make an impression. So while they're not time consuming, you do want to make sure that you are encouraging your students to put thought into these. And Kristen just shared in some of the chat some tips for how students can best answer these questions that we highly recommend sharing with your students as well. All right, so again, you're going to get these slides that walk through these via screenshots, everything we just talked about. And here's some examples of some real short answer responses that we've seen from students. So For example, why do you think we should select you for this opportunity? A student named Emma really clarified her passions. She talked about ways she's worked on her campus to kind of involve herself in this area further, did a great job. And Wyatt, while not a bad answer, didn't go quite as in depth, really didn't let their passion for this area shine through. So those are the kind of things that play a difference. And these are those examples too. We've got questions, responses that were selected, as well as feedback as to why they were probably selected, as well as some that weren't, and some feedback as to why, including, the fact that this was in all caps, the fact that there weren't examples, the fact that there were misspellings. And hopefully these examples will be helpful in explaining to your students how to put their best foot forward on Parker Dewey. And then after they get selected for a project, the next step is to do the work. So they will get the information for a supervisor for the project. That supervisor is going to be with the company that they're going to be working with. So they're going to get that opportunity to network and build connections. So they will have a kickoff conversation. They will have available resources from us at Parker Dewey, and a reminder again that they are encouraged to use their resources from your institution as well. Faculty, alumni, mentors, these are great conversations to have to say, hey, I'm working on this professional project. This is how I'm thinking of tackling it. Do you have any thoughts? And it's a great way to instill those conversations and create conversation starters for networking as well. And I know I mentioned this before, but we're still very excited to report that over 98% of these projects, these students and grads are exceeding employer expectations. So we've seen that they're inherently motivated to go out there and show their stuff, show what they can do. And a reminder again, we're here to help along the way. So whether it's related to make sure they're getting paid, making sure documents are filled out, questions about taxes, we're here and happy to help answer those questions. So, Kristen, do you want to highlight some of the benefits for career launchers?
Yeah, I'll give your voice a bit of a break. So, and just a reminder, folks, if you have any questions, feel free to send them in the chat. But pretty clear. We don't usually have to sell this to students very well because honestly, they see the value. We just recently conducted a survey and found that 72% of students want to engage in career relevant experiences as early as their sophomore year. So they're hungry to put what they're learning in your classes to work. And so we're just really excited to not only provide them with these opportunities, but just to stress that these are real world projects. These companies are posting these opportunities and paying students real money that goes to your students, not to some, not to Parker, just a marketing firm to send emails or anything like that. These are just real opportunities for students to connect, to get that resumeable experiences so that they can then, hopefully go on to leverage that experience to additional opportunities at the micro-internship host or perhaps elsewhere. And more importantly, we're excited to reintroduce the students that we highlighted earlier with some of their testimonials. And so Danielle put some additional stories in the chat in case any of these, if you want to dig deeper into any of these specific students' stories or read some of the more recent testimonials from these students that I think say it best, whatever their motivation. Maybe they're a student like Yera in the bottom left corner that said, I can't afford to do work that's unpaid, or a student like Legend that was constantly being passed over due to his GPA, or student like Noel, who had an amazing resume, but just had never been able to articulate his experiences when it came to a career fair because he was new to the field. And again, more and more stories that we're constantly seeing. Now, I also want to address populations of students that oftentimes have some challenges when it comes to doing paid work. So specifically, I want to highlight how this all works for international students. And so, yes, because these are paid opportunities, they do have to have work authorization, whether this be through CPT, OPT, or a work visa. And obviously, a lot of complexities and legalities around this. Our biggest goal is to not get the students in trouble and make sure that they have what they need to stay out of trouble, which is why, and you can zoom in on this when you see the slides on your own, but where that red arrow is pointing is to number 4 on a list of instructions that every student receives when they're selected for a micro-internship. And that number 4 item says that if you are an international student go to your International Student Services office to confirm your eligibility for this project. Again, every student who receives a micro-internship will receive that note. Now, in case you're curious, number 5 on the list says that if you're an undocumented student, yes, you can participate so long as you either have a Social Security number or DACA number, or if you have an international tax ID number. And again, if they have questions or concerns, they're welcome to reply to that email and follow up with us, and we're happy to walk them through it. For the international students, we are the employer of record, as we've said a few times now, and so we're happy to also provide you, or if you or we are a student, with an offer letter that outlines the details of the project that they've been selected for, so that they can then take that to whoever it is that they need to work with on your campus to be able to authorize CPT, OPT, et cetera. And again, happy to elaborate and dig into this further should this be, if you have any questions, or if your international student colleagues may have some questions. Now let's talk now a little bit about how it works for companies. Now, we joke internally here at Parker Dewey that everything on our platform has to be Jeffrey proof. If any of you have met our CEO, Jeffrey Moss, wonderful, wonderful person, not a lot of patience. And so we have to keep it very simple. Otherwise, nobody will do it. And again, Jeffrey is our kind of litmus test for that. So 3 steps, just like for students. For companies, they post their project, pick who they want to work with, and the work gets done. And again, behind the scenes, Parker Dewey is helping with whether they have questions about scoping that project, or what would be appropriate compensation, or is this something that would align with the student's interests or skills, et cetera. We're happy to help them with shortening the list of students, or helping select, or whatever sort of assistance they might need on the back end, in addition, of course, to the administration of the payroll, et cetera. So just to unpack a few of those things, just so you can see how it all works from the company side. Most of the micro-internships on our platform do come from the dozens of templates that we have on our website, and you can check out the project library if you'd wish. But companies are also welcome to customize a project from scratch, and you'll see that in a moment. But essentially in the project, they highlight what needs to be done, their timeline, and any sort of specific skills, details about the project, if it needs to be a specific location, if they're looking for 1 student, if they're looking for 100 students, or whatever the case may be. We are also regularly providing our partner schools with a page like what you see in that bottom right corner. If you work for a nonprofit organization, similarly, we're happy to build out a page like this, which essentially makes it easy for whoever it is that you want to share micro-internships with. They now have a resource where they have some FAQs, they have some testimonials, and more importantly, they have some sample projects where they can post these projects on demand within a handful of clicks. Their project is up and running for your students. Now, those are if they want to work with a templated project, but they can also, as I mentioned already, start from scratch, where they can go in and enter the details about their project on their own. They can limit it, as Danielle illustrated earlier, so that only students from your school or the local schools in your region, or if they're interested in a specific affiliation. So if you're a nonprofit organization, we can add your organization as an affiliation, meaning that only the students who are part of your organization would see that project. So for example, we work with an organization called the Dream.us, which is committed towards providing support for undocumented students. And any companies that may have an initiative and similar goals in that area can add that affiliation, and only the students with that in their profile would see those projects listed first. And companies are using this for a variety of reasons. We're seeing them if they are from their alma mater, want to give back. I went to Ohio State, so if I only wanted Buckeyes to see this project, I could go in, put Ohio State in that profile, or in that school section, and only students from my alma mater would see that project. I could also add a few other schools, definitely not that school up north in Michigan, but others within the Big Ten or elsewhere, where I could go ahead and add additional schools. Or if I wanted to, or any organization can go ahead and not put any schools in the profile, which would or in their project description, which would then open it to all students. And they have the ability to filter based on applicants if that is something that's important to them. Now, when they are reviewing applicants, one thing that is very, very different from how Parker Dewey is set up versus other job boards, especially in the college recruiting space, is that we are not a resume database. What does that mean? Well, it means that the students have to apply in order for employers to see them. So if I create an employer account, and you are welcome to create an employer account, a student account right now if you'd like, but from an employer perspective, you're not going to see any students until you post a project. And then the only students that you'll see are those who have applied to that project. And we have set it up this way for a few different reasons. One is because we take student privacy extremely seriously. And so this just allows it to make it so that the students aren't in front of companies that they may or may not be interested in. But it also makes it easier for organizations, for companies, so that they don't have to guess if Danielle is interested or available in my project. They'll know Danielle is interested because Danielle will apply to that particular project. So they see who's applied, they can see their resume, they can see their LinkedIn profile, assuming the student provided that information. And more importantly, they can see those application responses. They can see how did the student reply to that short answer, why should we pick you type of question. And if they like, they can choose the student right there on the spot. And many, many, many employers don't even do interviews for micro-internships, but rather select the student based solely on how they answer those application questions. And for those of you who are working directly with students, this provides you with a fantastic opportunity to coach and advise your students so that if they do need a little bit of help in professional communication, in editing, in what have you, this is an opportunity for you to see how they've responded to those short answer application questions, which are essentially like an interview question, and be able to coach them. Because maybe they are not getting past that initial round of resume reviews, and maybe their resume does look good, but they're messing up on some sort of email exchange with the company that's just not as professional as it should or could be. And what we're hoping is that if they are making those kinds of mistakes, that they make them here before the stakes are higher for an internship or a full-time role. And so again, you can hopefully provide them with some of those coachable and teachable moments early on, and work with your student one-on-one, have them log into their Parker Dewey profile, pull up those application responses, and then you and the student can see how then they may be able to improve. Now, from there, what happens after they are selected? Well, it really becomes up to the project supervisor. You know, again, we'll recommend they have that webinar or excuse me, a Zoom conversation, but from there, it really depends on the project, how much or little the company wants to engage with the student in order to execute the project. We don't define and say you have to use these profiles or anything along those lines, but rather we do make recommendations and try to stay out of the way of the student directly working with the company in order to execute the project. And so, you know, what are some of the benefits? Well, how are companies using this? And those of you who are working directly with companies, there's a lot of different ways that this can fit in. First of all, we want to make it easy for them because otherwise, again, they're not going to do this. But more importantly, they're using this as another way to connect with organizations real time. For those of you who have companies that, like the poll earlier illustrated, that are saying, you know, nobody's applying to my project, nobody knows about my company, I'm in a location that's just hard to get students to come to because it's just not on their radar, where this is a way for them to realize that the company is doing interesting and exciting work. It's a way for them to access new demographics. Can't stress that enough. And that the opportunity for students to do real paid work and have their time be compensated is huge in terms of opening up other demographics of students that frankly just can't come to the career fair because they don't have time in their schedule, or who can't come to that info session because, well, first of all, they didn't know about it in the first place. They've got 100 other emails that are higher priority, but they also have to work, or they're training for their sport, or they have to study that night, or whatever the case may be. This is an opportunity for them to have that on-demand opportunity to connect with that company directly. And then again, it's opportunities for you. Maybe you just fielded a phone call from an employer who is really excited to work with your students, but they don't need to hire somebody for an internship or a full-time role, but they have a short-term project. This is an option for you to have someplace to send them that they can directly work with your students. And maybe they were an alum. Maybe there's a nonprofit that their busy season isn't in the summer. And so they didn't, now they need the extra help, but whereas in the summer they didn't. So again, lots of ways where this might be able to fit in. And we're really excited to see the quantifiable results of the direct impact of micro-internships. Danielle, I'll take a breath here and have you highlight some of these.
Yes, by all means. So want to talk about, like Kristen said, the results. What happens after the micro-internship? So compared to 45.3% of all recent college graduates who are under or unemployed after graduation, only 4.1%, less than 5% of those who completed micro-internships. So we attribute that to they're out there making those connections, they're having those experiences, they're applying with more confidence to the things they want. And we'll talk about the impact on confidence here a little bit more in a minute. Employer retention is also something very exciting to be able to share with those employers who you may be talking about if they're considering posting a micro-internship, because compared to less than half of all recent graduates who stay with their first professional full-time role for more than a year after graduation, 98.1% of those who have completed micro-internships are with that first full-time professional role for more than a year. So for your recruiting partners, the savings on retention costs, because they don't have to re-recruit for that role in less than a year, are pretty exciting. And again, we think that's because these students have had experiences to understand what it is that they're looking for. So when they're making that commitment, they're making it with more knowledge, with more understanding, because they've had the chance to try different things. And then something else that we imagine you'll be excited to share with your campus recruiters, because they're generally excited to hear it, is when you look if they're using micro-internships as a recruiting tool, the traditional cost of campus recruiting, according to NACE, is usually somewhere in that $3,500 to just under $7,000. It's expensive ballpark, but using micro-internships creates between a 40 to 80% savings. So it's really exciting, not only in terms of impact, but also in terms of the financial sense it makes for your employer partners to be using these micro-internships as a recruiting tool. So I kind of already said we'd be talking about the confidence impact as well. Something else that we've been doing is asking those who have recently completed micro-internships is what, if any, impact has your experience had on your career competencies? So we're asking them, did you improve a lot, improve a little, or maybe you didn't have any change at all, but did you build confidence? And of course, we give them the option to select, there was no change at all in these areas. And what we're seeing is not only is there a good amount of improvement, particularly when it comes to professionalism, critical thinking, career and self-development, technology, but even in those areas where perhaps they're not saying that they improved in terms of their ability, there are a lot of reports saying, maybe my actual ability didn't change, but man, did my confidence in my ability change? And you see that in particular with competencies like leadership, with teamwork. So lots of really exciting reports in those areas as well. And we'll put the chat to those. I think Kristen already did, so you can read more in depth about those results too. So now we want to talk about building your micro-internship program. This is not okay, if you start today, you can maybe have this rolled out by 2023. No, this is a matter of days, not months. So one of the benefits is connecting with us to identify your goals, because every institution has different goals, and we want to make sure that we're doing things to align with what you want to accomplish. For our partners, we create a customized portal with your messaging to be able to reach your target audience. So we gave you that example of the employer side page before. We create a customized portal that kind of speaks to your students and your various stakeholders. And we're also excited to share best practices that align with whatever your goals are. There's a chance that you might have a goal that we haven't interacted with before, but there's also a very high chance that we've had someone with a similar goal before, and we can share what has worked well in the past. We also have a ton of marketing collateral, including launch toolkits designed to make it easy for you to share this with your students, with your employers, with your alumni, to get the word out and get them excited and engaged with this. So that includes social media, email templates, newsletter templates, digital signage, and more. And if there's something you want once you're a partner that you don't see in the toolkit, you just let us know and we'll create it. We are also here for ongoing support. to strategize, be here for what you need. Again, as that employer of record, we manage the payroll and the legal support for companies. And we're here with measurable data too, so you can see what impact your program is having. In fact, I'll put this story in the chat in just a little bit. We have support a program with John Carroll University where they are funding micro-internships through a grant for a historically excluded populations on their campus. And they used the data that we provided them about their program and about their micro-internships to reapply for funding. Not only were they awarded the funding, but they were awarded more than they even asked for, which is something that I hear about a lot. So I'll be putting that story in the chat too, so you can hear about that. But it's just one example of what an impact this data can have.
But given whatever your goals might be, you want to highlight a couple of case studies of how other universities or other institutions have implemented their micro-internship program, yes, to support students, but also as a new way to align with other strategic priorities. And so given that, I want to highlight 4 different examples of some of these different initiatives based on what your goals might be. And again, bottom line is to provide more opportunities for students. So that goes without saying. But what I would encourage you to think about is, where might this model also fit in to complement some of these other things that you have on your radar and want to also see to fruition. So given that, first one we're going to highlight is ways that this might align with some of your alumni support efforts. So Danielle, would you mind advancing the slide here? Thank you, because there might be a lag. So when it comes to engaging your alumni, this is a new opportunity for you and your alumni to connect and give back and all of that. But a way to think of this is, most schools have some sort of mentoring initiative. Think of this as mentorship on steroids. I recently did a mentorship with a student from my alma mater and had nice conversations, but honestly, the conversations go a little bit, are forced and always not super impactful, even with scripts and other guides, et cetera, that we are provided. Whereas if you have a conversation about a real world project where a student can say, hey, I am working on this HR project for a company that needs some help updating their job descriptions in this specific functional area. I know you've worked in HR, you'd love to have your perspective on this. How much more meaningful and impactful will that conversation, and beneficial will that conversation be for the student? But it also is a lot more interesting for the mentor to be able to use their expertise and their professional experiences to be able to have those conversations. So that being said, a lot of schools have started some sort of alumni micro-internship program. In the case of Swarthmore, they began their program in the early days of the pandemic, ran it for themselves for the first year, and then after a year, they were looking for opportunities to scale the program. It was extremely popular for both students and alumni, but a lot of work for their team to administer. So they reached out to us and said, hey, can you help? And we have been running that program, the SWATworks program, ever since, with various types of micro-internships set up for multiple durations. We handle all the back-end administration and, of course, handle all of the payroll to the students and just the day-to-day questions about projects, questions about from alumni, running the whole show so that, again, their team isn't burdened by this and report back on the specific data points that are relevant to them. And so it was a way that they can, again, scale the program to make it reach even more students, reach even more alumni, and track that ever so important data around who is engaging with these projects, what types of alumni, what are the types of projects, are they working for nonprofits, are there only first-year students, or are there only seniors who are participating in this, or is it more first, second, third-year students, et cetera. And so we've been able to unpack a lot of different data to be able to really measure the impact of this program. Another resource is to engage your employer partners. And this is an opportunity that certainly does not replace whatever sort of career management platform that you're already using, but rather is another way that you can say, hey, company, if you have a job or an internship, then go to Handshake or Simplicity or whatever platform that your school already uses. But in the case of Florida AMU, their students are very, very high demand. They fill out their career fair months in advance, and they needed another opportunity for companies and to connect with their students, which is where micro-internships really played a nice role to fill that gap. Not only for the big companies who are trying to build their brand to connect with their students, et cetera, but a lot of those smaller organizations that didn't have full-time roles or internships, et cetera, this was a way for them to get them back, to give back and connect, and to have an additional branding opportunity, et cetera. And you can see the specific ways that, and sites that, and how FAMU is marketing their micro-internship campaigns and program to employers if you want to click on all the underlined links on the page. Another resource as well, and in the interest of time, we'll go ahead and keep moving forward, is embedding this as an opportunity for organizations to sponsor your institution via not only funding micro-internships, but potentially also funding other, however you use sponsorship dollars. And the way that this is set up, again, could be a bunch of different ways. You'll see an example there where a $5,000 sponsorship, you pick the number, it could be scaled up or down, but a portion is allocated towards however your institution uses sponsorship initiatives and dollars. And then the other portion is allocated to putting those into experiential learning opportunities, micro-internships, again, going directly into the pockets of your students. And what this is allowing those organizations to do is, or at least these higher education institutions to do, is not only benefit from the sponsorship revenue, but also benefit because it gives these companies another way to connect with students. It helps allocate those philanthropic dollars that they're already spending in various ways, but that money is now directly also aligning with some of their talent acquisition goals. They're seeing your students in action. Maybe they sponsor your career fair, maybe they sponsor various initiatives all over campus, but how many of your students are they hiring? Well, it may be that they're hiring a lot, but not a lot of the students that are also aligning with your institutional goals or priorities. Maybe they're not hiring your liberal arts students who are incredible. Maybe they're not hiring your student athletes because those student athletes aren't able to come to the events that you're hosting. And so this gives them another way, an opportunity to connect with your students in a whole new way. And keep in mind, all of this is data points that you can showcase in your annual reports, in your accreditation documents, to be able to show how you are delivering direct value in professional development to your students. We have schools that are using micro-internship data, like what Danielle illustrated, to not only obtain more grant funding, but also to add to their annual reports when looking at student placements and just overall student engagement, or even alumni employer engagement in general. Another use case for micro-internships would be to help support those local organizations, and we're seeing a lot of examples of this real time. One of my favorites, Danielle, you're directly working with this organization, is the University of California, Irvine, that has an entrepreneur center that they call the Antrapreneur Center. It aligns with their mascot, but they are full in trying to really spread the word about micro-internships, and have had dozens of employers already express interest, already starting to post projects. And their program, it hasn't even hit the 1 month mark. But just through the concerted effort to spread the word about how this opportunity allows them to connect with students, allows them to get that just-in-time support. It's a real win-win for these local organizations. And it's really addressing an issue that is common throughout the country, and that is the issue of brain drain. I've had, I think, several conversations today alone addressing that it is every single school and region is having that challenge of how do you keep these amazing students that are educated in our higher education institutions, how do you keep them here so that they don't have to go elsewhere after graduation to find a great job? Well, programs like this can help to inform those students about the many opportunities and the many great employers that are right in your backyard. Programs like CincyTech, which is a tech incubator in Cincinnati that works with these IT startups in and around the greater Cincinnati area, and who has an affinity for working with University of Cincinnati and Miami University students, and have hired dozens of them to work on these short-term projects. Or even more is a program that we're running in throughout the state of Kansas that we'll talk more about in a moment as well. One other example that I'll share is grant-funded opportunities. We're seeing a lot of this, whether it be support to nonprofits, alumni, or other entities, but essentially grants like George Washington University that had a $5,000 grant that was about to expire. They needed to find a home for that money. And they said, well, put it in the students' pockets. And so what they did is they allocated these towards funding 10-hour projects. They supported 25 students, 25 companies, and the students not only did a phenomenal job on these different projects, one of them at least ended up with a full-time position, but it allowed them also to engage a whole new category of individuals, whether they be recruiters who already knew and loved GW, but they were now looking for new ways to connect, maybe with younger students or what have you, allowed them to connect with alumni or re-engage those alums. It allowed them to connect with organizations that weren't familiar with George Washington University. Maybe they're located elsewhere or what have you. And so it's been a really great way for these students to have new opportunities and to be able to gauge new employers. And again, at no cost to the institution in this case, because it was funded by the grant. So the students were getting that support. And Danielle highlighted the story of the student who was hired for that full-time position, in case you're interested in reading more about it. And one last example we'll share as well is our collaboration, a number of different entities, a nonprofit, as well as statewide board of regents throughout the state of Kansas. And we've been really honored to partner with the Kansas Board of Regents and Department of Commerce, along with the DeBruce Foundation, a Kansas City-based nonprofit, for about almost 2 years now, running their Kansas Micro-Internship Program. And the whole idea, again, addressing the issue of brain drain, of trying to keep these students that are educated in community colleges and public universities in Kansas, to help them realize that they don't need to leave the state to find really, really exciting and interesting work. And so this particular program funds the first micro-internship for these Kansas-based employers, so long as they pick a student who is attending a public school in Kansas, whether that be a university or a two-year college. And again, it's been really great to see the momentum build, to see the students gain these professional experiences, to see these companies realize the value and go on to post more and more and more, so that it becomes a self-sustaining entity and program that continues to drive regional development opportunities to support these students. So in short, there's a lot of different ways and directions that micro-internships can fit in, and we would be honored just to continue the conversation to help however we can. In our last few seconds here, just in terms of what's next, we'll of course be sending out the slides and the recording, etc. But we just ask you and challenge you: what are your goals behind micro-internships, and where might some of these ideas perhaps align with some of your institutional priorities? I think, Danielle, we had one final poll question, so those of you who are sticking around and want to share your thoughts with us, I'd love to hear a little bit more about where this may fit with some of your goals and institutional priorities. And don't be a stranger. Danielle and I would be happy to connect one-on-one to elaborate on any of these ideas, to get to hear more about what your goals are, and to be able to be supportive as possible. So again, we're really excited to have this opportunity to talk with you all. Thank you, above all, for spending an hour of your very busy fall to join us. And again, we're excited to continue the conversation and help however we can. So wishing you a great fall. And again, thank you so much.